a judge husband, to save his white moonlight darling suffering from uremia, arbitrarily sentenced my kidney to her. I explained to my husband that I had kidney failure, and another kidney transplant would certainly kill me. But my husband roared at me with disgust. Victoria is so seriously ill, and you're still here being jealous. Do you even have a heart? Under my husband's forced judgment, I was sent to the hospital for a kidney transplant. In the end, due to worsening kidney failure, I died miserably in a deserted corner of the hospital. While Julian was by Victoria's hospital bedside, I was lying on a cold operating table, waiting for death in despair. Tubes filled my whole body, and the sound of the machines, like the Grim Reaper claiming a life, reminded me that it was time to go. Until my electrocardiogram became a straight line, news of a successful operation came from Victoria's side. The emergency lights in the operating room went out, and my eyes closed forever. Perhaps I had a lot of resentment before my death, because my soul actually came to Julian's side. Watching Julian hug Victoria, who had escaped death, his eyes red with excitement, my heart also sank to the bottom. I wanted to ask Julian, when we were both pushed into the operating room at the same time, did he have even a moment of concern for my life and death? The answer was no. After all, Julian had sued me in court for Victoria's illness. Julian hired the most famous lawyer in the industry, and under his sentence, I still lost in the end. When my kidney was being removed, I was in so much pain in the operating room that my back was soaked with sweat. I called him, my tone pleading. Husband, I was wrong, okay? Don't take my kidney, it really hurts, I'm going to die. I, who had never softened in front of Julian, thought that if I admitted defeat and took on all the trumped-up charges, would Julian spare my life for the sake of our 5 years of relationship? But Julian sneered on the phone. Admitting your mistakes is what you should do. Being able to save Victoria's life is your good fortune. Don't think about trying to muddle through. Don't think that giving Victoria your kidney means you don't have to apologize. All the things you've done to hurt Victoria over the years, I'll settle the score with you after Victoria recovers. You want to die? Then you have to apologize to Victoria before you die. I tried to open my cracked mouth, wanting to deny that those fictitious things were not done by me, but I really didn't have the strength. Julian seemed not to have vented his anger, and said fiercely to me, "You look disgusting to me." As the phone was hung up, my heart sank to the bottom, and along with it, my 5 years of love for Julian also vanished. Julian said I was disgusting, but when he married me, he said affectionately that he would love me for the rest of my life, that I was his first choice, his exception and special favor. But after Victoria came along, he forgot about me, his wife. Julian's hand gently caressed Victoria's face, as if looking at some fragile treasure. "That's great you're alive. That's great." The choked tone, the bloodshot eyes, all told me that Julian had been up all night because of Victoria. But when Julian was worried about Victoria, did he think that I was already dead? Victoria barely opened her pale lips. "Julian, I'm sorry for making you worry. Where's Sister Eleanor? Is she still angry with me? I'll go apologize to her right now." As she spoke, Victoria tried to support herself to get up, but the extent of this feigned attempt was obvious to everyone, except Julian. Sure enough, Julian gently pressed Victoria back, stroking her head indulgently. "Silly girl, Eleanor should be the one apologizing. What did you do wrong? You're always so kind that you'll be bullied." The nurse looked at the two and couldn't help but joke. "You two are really loving." Then she looked at Victoria. "When you were having surgery, your husband waited in the hallway all night, not leaving for a step." Victoria blushed, but Julian's expression only paused, and he didn't intend to explain the misunderstanding. Then the nurse changed the subject, sighing deeply. Unlike the operating table next door, the patient was alone from the moment they came in, and no relatives came to take care of things after they died. How pitiful. Julian's face relaxed a little, and hope ignited in my heart. If Julian could guess that the pitiful person was me, would he be merciful enough to collect my body? After waiting for a long time, Julian only sighed. "That is indeed pitiful." My eyes dulled, and I smiled self-deprecatingly. Julian's mind was now full of Victoria. How could he think of me? Julian didn't continue the topic, but followed the nurse to push Victoria into the ward. When passing the operating room where my body was placed, Julian paused. He glanced inside. My cold body was lying there, but my feet were facing the door, so people couldn't see my true face. But if Julian looked carefully, he could see the wound on my ankle, which I had sustained to save Julian. After Julian and Victoria entered the ward, Caleb ran in from outside, brushing past Julian. Caleb grabbed my hand trembling, his voice shaking. He wanted to touch my hair, but when his fingertips touched my cold forehead, 2 lines of clear tears flowed down. Idiot, it would have been better if you had married me back then. You wouldn't have fallen to the point where no one cares even when you're dead. Looking at Caleb's travel-stained appearance, my nose was still sore. It seemed that he had just returned from another province. In fact, Caleb had left the city since I got married. The reason Caleb gave me back then was that Julian couldn't tolerate him, and he didn't want to bring me unnecessary trouble, so it was better to leave. I was an orphan, adopted by the Chi family when I was 7 years old, and Caleb was my nominal brother. At first, he didn't like me, but as time went on, he became better and better to me. I broke off with my adoptive parents for Julian back then. The reason was simple. They wanted me to marry a business partner. I knew that they adopted me not because they liked me, but because they lacked a marriage partner. Caleb helped me escape from the Chi family. As for Caleb's affection for me, I had known it for a long time. But in the end, I still married in order to protect Caleb. Compared to Julian, I couldn't marry Caleb, at least my adoptive parents would not agree. Caleb took my body away. At the same time, Julian was going out to buy food for Victoria, just because Victoria said she suddenly wanted to eat a small cake from a place 30 miles away. Julian got up without hesitation. But when I just wanted to eat the rice ball downstairs, and asked Julian to bring it to me when he got off work, he was too lazy to go out of his way. When Caleb met Julian head-on, my body was covered with a white cloth. Julian and Caleb looked at each other. Julian knew Caleb. Make way. Caleb didn't speak politely. Yes, how could Caleb be polite to someone who personally killed me? Julian's expression was complicated, and he took a step back. After all, one should respect the dead. But when Caleb turned around, Julian's gaze fell on my ankle. Wait a minute. Julian seemed to remember something and chased after him. Who is the dead person to you? My breath caught, afraid that Caleb would directly reveal the information of my death, and even more afraid that Caleb wouldn't say anything. I was very eager to see what Julian's reaction would be after he knew of my death. Caleb was silent for a long time, then suddenly spoke. It's my wife. I was stunned, and Julian was also stunned. Julian knew about my situation, including Caleb's love for me. When did you get married? Julian blurted out subconsciously, and after asking this question, he was also a little stunned. Caleb sneered and retorted unceremoniously. I don't think that's Mr. Julian's business, is it? Julian choked, somewhat mockingly. You used to say you loved Eleanor, but I see you're nothing more than that. Caleb, who had already walked away, paused, looked back at Julian, and left only one sentence. Compared to you, I haven't done enough. Such obvious sarcasm. I don't believe Julian couldn't hear it. I followed Caleb away, looking back at Julian. I seemed not to love him as much as I used to. Victoria was discharged from the hospital a month later, and Julian picked her up. Compared to me, who only had one Caleb after death, Victoria's ward was so lively. All her relatives and friends were crowded in the ward. When Julian appeared, the whole place boiled over. Judge Julian, when are you going to marry our Victoria? Seeing how anxious you are about her, our Victoria is so happy. Victoria lowered her head shyly, her voice as small as a mosquito. Don't say that, Julian is already married. I don't want Sister Eleanor to hear and misunderstand us. I don't want to be a third party, otherwise she'll make things difficult for me again. One of her friends said sarcastically. What's so good about that petty woman who only knows how to be jealous? Julian loves you. The one who is not loved is the third party. Besides hurting you, what else can she do? If it were me, I would have divorced her a long time ago. Hearing these words, I only felt amused. So I was the third party. But Victoria was always like this. She always guided Julian to think that everything was my fault. What made me even more heartbroken was Julian's attitude. He didn't say a word, but helped Victoria pack her things. No one in the whole room moved a finger. I remembered the days after I married Julian. He always said that he would always love me, But I did the housework, I suffered the grievances. I originally thought he would help me resist the storms, but later I realized that all the storms were given by Julian. Judge Julian, Victoria has been single for you for so many years. You can't let Victoria down. The person who spoke the most enthusiastically grabbed Julian's arm, trying to match the two of them. My heart was bitter. So that's how they talked about me in private, as if in their eyes I was the one who was unforgivable. Julian didn't answer directly. I guess that's what he thought too. Victoria was taken back to Julian's bachelor apartment. That house was Julian's private territory after we quarreled, and he had never taken me there. I should have thought of it. Victoria was Julian's exception, and he could change all his principles for Victoria. Julian put Victoria's things neatly in place. When he was bending over, Victoria suddenly walked over and hugged Julian's waist. My heart tightened. My body was still cold, but the two of them were so close. The atmosphere between them was as if Julian had never been married. Julian's body stiffened, looking like he wanted to dodge, but Victoria's arms tightened even more. She leaned her head on Julian's back and murmured softly, "Julian, please give me one more chance, okay? I didn't leave you on purpose back then. If my mother hadn't gotten sick, I wouldn't have taken Mr. Julian's money and left you." Oh, so it was to save someone with money. The two of them ended up in a B ending. It's a cliché plot, but Julian remembered it for so long. Julian let out a laugh that didn't reveal his emotions. If you had told me the truth back then, we wouldn't have ended up with regrets. Couldn't I have provided the money my dad could? Victoria choked on her words. But Victoria is smart. She knew that Julian now loathed me, and quickly steered the topic towards me. Is it because you hate me that you didn't care when Eleanor bullied me? She hired people to smear my reputation at the company, and even found thugs to beat me up. Even after I got sick, you wouldn't donate a kidney to me. Is that your way of getting revenge? Lies. Victoria is lying. Everything she said is false. I don't even know where Victoria's company is. Besides, I'm an orphan. Where would I get the power to hire a bunch of thugs? A careful investigation would reveal the loopholes in Victoria's slander, but Julian believes it without a doubt. And Victoria's so-called neglect from Julian is even more of a fantasy. Ever since Julian found out about all of this, he dragged me out of my company in front of all my colleagues, his expression ferocious, as if I had done something shameful. Then he found a bunch of thugs and watched me being humiliated and beaten. I huddled in the corner in despair, shivering, while those people held up their phones to film my naked videos. Julian sat to the side watching the show. Finally, he waved his phone in front of my eyes, with a hint of threat. If you dare to hurt Victoria again, I wouldn't mind uploading these videos to the internet. It will be your lifelong weakness. Even though I said many times that it wasn't me, Julian was like a deaf man, never believing me. Now that Victoria is bringing up the past, Julian didn't tell Victoria how he tormented me because of Victoria's slander. It's truly ironic. I don't understand why Julian doesn't love me, yet married me. Julian, let's start over, okay? Just pretend that you haven't been married, and I haven't betrayed you. I really love you. Victoria saw Julian's solemn expression, and softened her tone. Victoria has always been good at coaxing Julian, and Julian always fell for it. On the other hand, when Julian was angry, even if I tried my best, Julian wouldn't give me a smile. Love and lack of love are very obvious, but I was so stupid that I only saw all of this clearly after I died. The man who never smiled at me was always gentle with another woman. His bottom line could also be lowered again and again for Victoria. My heart was filled with dense, aching pain. I no longer care how Victoria slandered me, or how Julian hated me. You just got out of the hospital. You should rest earlier. Julian pushed Victoria away, didn't directly answer Victoria's question, and left. After Julian left, Victoria stomped her feet in anger. Julian came downstairs and looked up at the balcony of our house. It was pitch black. I always left a light on for Julian back then. No matter how late he came back, that light could always shine on the path beneath his feet. Julian was visibly stunned. After returning home, Julian opened the door. The place hadn't been lived in for more than a month, and a coldness greeted him. Julian frowned. "Eleanor, how long are you going to sulk? I just sued you. If you didn't know Victoria, I wouldn't have treated you like that. Julian shouted towards the bedroom, his tone filled with disgust and blame. I followed Julian, just smiling coldly. 5 years of affection couldn't compare to someone else's few words. Fortunately, I died, otherwise there would have been more days like this in the future. Today Julian could want my life for Victoria. Tomorrow he could do anything. Julian searched the whole house for me. The dishes I made before going to the hospital were still on the table, but they were already moldy, unrecognizable from their original form. That day happened to be our 5th wedding anniversary. I waited and waited, but what I got was a court order for compulsory enforcement. Even if I didn't ask, I knew that Julian was comforting the soon-to-be-reborn Victoria that day. Victoria said she was afraid of surgery, and Julian held Victoria's hand tightly and told her not to be afraid. And I faced death directly. When I needed Julian the most, he was hoping for someone else to live. Julian frowned as he looked at the mess on the table, took out his phone and called me. 1 call, 2 calls, I couldn't even count how many times Julian called me. He rarely insisted like this. To be precise, Julian never took the initiative to call me if there was nothing important. He was quite patient today. But that call no one answered. Julian saw that the phone couldn't get through and sent me a WeChat message. He sent a voice message directly. Eleanor, haven't you sulked enough? The house is a mess. I haven't even settled the score with you yet, but you ran away first. I give you 1 hour to get back here, otherwise we'll get a divorce. Divorce. Divorce is good. If Julian had mentioned it before, I probably would have agreed, and I wouldn't have ended up like this. Soon Julian's phone vibrated. The light in his eyes visibly brightened, but when he saw that it was a message from Victoria, it dimmed significantly. I don't know if it's just my imagination. Julian, I left something at the hospital. Can you help me get it? Julian quickly replied with okay. When he was putting on his coat, he still waited at the door for a moment. He turned around and looked at the house, his expression unclear. I smiled bitterly. It's already late at night, but Julian is always like this, always responding to Victoria's requests. I once had a stomachache in the middle of the night and asked him to take me to the hospital, but he said the hospital was too far. Now the hospital isn't far, is it? Julian drove to the hospital and found the ward where Victoria had stayed. He ran into a nurse head-on. I recognized that nurse. She was next to me during the surgery, and she also saw the live broadcast of me going to court on TV. She felt very sympathetic towards me. When the nurse saw clearly that it was Julian, she snorted in disdain. What? Only now do you remember to look for your wife who died on the operating table? Julian stopped. He looked at the nurse in disbelief. What did you say? Who died? The nurse looked at Julian as if he were mentally challenged. Your wife, Eleanor. I really don't know how you acted as her husband. Your wife had kidney failure, and you let her donate a kidney. Isn't that taking her life? Julian froze in place. A glimmer of hope actually rose in my heart. But the next second, Julian's words made me feel cold from head to toe. I really didn't expect Eleanor to be so capable that she could even bribe people here. How can she be so shameless? Is there any dirty thing she can't do? The nurse and I were both speechless at Julian's words. So in Julian's heart, I was actually this kind of person. The nurse sneered. I finally know why Eleanor died so miserably alone. It's so tragic to have a husband like you with a brain problem. After the nurse finished speaking, she was about to leave, but Julian stopped her. He glared angrily. What nonsense are you talking about? I didn't expect you to be so dedicated. How much money did Eleanor give you? I'll give you double. Now tell me where Eleanor is. Watch me expose her clumsy acting in person. As he spoke, Julian forcibly pulled the nurse, wanting to find me. The nurse shook Julian off in horror. Mr. Julian, please respect yourself. This is a hospital. Julian just rolled his eyes, feeling guilty. Tell me what department you're in. You know what I do, right? It's easy for me to send you to court. As long as you tell the truth, your job can still be saved. The nurse was instantly terrified in place, her face pale, and her shoulders were shaking. I'm sorry. I was bewitched. Please forgive me, don't take away my job. I was icy cold all over. Almost, just a little bit. I was looking forward to Julian's reaction when he found out I was dead. But I also understood the nurse's fear. Yes, even I, as Julian's wife, could be sent to court by him without any mercy. And the nurse was just working diligently here, so naturally she was even more afraid. I won't blame the nurse. I just feel that Julian's stubbornness makes my heart cold. He would rather believe that I was a villain who would do anything to win favor than believe my sincerity for so many years. The last bit of hope was extinguished in my heart. I followed Julian out of the hospital like a walking corpse. To be accurate, I was just a soul without a body. But at the door, we met an unexpected person, Caleb. I don't know why Julian always acts like a needle to a wheat when he sees Caleb, but clearly Julian doesn't love me at all. Why does he have possessiveness? What are you doing here? Oh, I know you and Eleanor have been having an affair for a long time, right? That's right, you two are birds of a feather, a perfect match. Julian said such sharp words with a sneer. Caleb's shoulders trembled slightly. I don't know if he was angry or sad. Maybe Caleb felt it was not worth it for me. I'm already dead, and Julian is still throwing mud at me. Caleb chuckled. He didn't deny it, but boldly admitted it. Yes, if you hadn't intervened between us, Eleanor and I would have been together long ago. Julian was stunned for a moment. Perhaps he didn't expect Caleb to admit it so readily. His expression was very complicated. Unexpected surprise, calm after anger, or revolted after knowing the disgusting truth? I don't know. I realized that after ending 5 years with Julian, I didn't understand him at all. Caleb slowly walked towards Julian, his eyes filled with blood, as if he hadn't rested well for a long time. He parted his thin lips slightly. Everyone in this world deserves Eleanor's goodness, except you. The voice was not loud, but it was enough to deafen people. Julian clenched his fists, forcing a smile, a mocking one. You'll never have her, Caleb. As long as Eleanor and I are married, you can forget about it. Don't forget, you and Eleanor are family. Even if you're not blood related, you're still family. Do you think your parents will approve? You better bury your dirty, disgusting crush for the rest of your life. With a smack, before I could react, Caleb slapped Julian across the face. A red mark immediately surfaced on Julian's pale cheek. You dare hit me? As Julian raised his hand to strike back, I instinctively stepped in front of Caleb. When I remembered I was just a soul, I looked back to see Caleb had already grabbed Julian's wrist, his eyes devoid of warmth. This slap is for Eleanor. She couldn't bear to do it, but I can. Having said that, Caleb didn't give Julian any room to retort and walked straight into the hospital. As Caleb brushed past Julian, his shoulder slammed into Julian, causing him to lose his balance and almost fall. Caleb, tell Eleanor that if she doesn't come back tonight, she's never coming back. Caleb paused, glanced back at Julian, and chuckled. She won't be back. Yes, how could I go back? Julian stared at Caleb's retreating figure for a long time. I couldn't tell what he was thinking through his eyes. My soul followed Caleb into the hospital room I used to stay in. The room was empty, no different from the day I moved in. Caleb stroked the hospital bed I used to lie on. He was silent at first, then suddenly smiled. You idiot, you must have been in so much pain back then, right? My heart instantly felt like it was being squeezed. For so long after my death, Julian had never asked if I was in pain. He just watched me lying helplessly on the hospital bed and coldly asked, "How can you be so selfish? You only made up those lies because you were jealous of Victoria." But I had been undergoing dialysis for kidney failure every day for a while, afraid he would worry, and hadn't told him. If he had paid a little more attention to me, he would have seen that my body was getting thinner and thinner, and my face was always pale. But Julian would rather believe that I was jealous of Victoria than believe that I was really sick. When Julian forced me to have my kidney removed, he didn't even ask if I was in pain. Instead, he stood in front of the cold operating table and smiled disdainfully. "Aren't you still alive? I knew all along you were lying to make Victoria die." I watched helplessly as my kidney was carefully placed in a cold storage box and taken away by Julian as if it were a treasure. I knew he cherished it not because it was my kidney, but because it could save Victoria's life. And now, Caleb's one sentence, "You must have been in so much pain," made all my pent-up grievances find a release. But before I could shed a tear, Caleb had already burst into tears. I wanted to reach out and touch Caleb's shoulder, but my hand passed right through his body. This reminded me of the first day I went to the Chi family, more than a decade ago. I was skinny and small then, having just experienced the death of both my parents. None of my relatives were willing to take me in, even with the compensation money for my parents. They didn't want to take on a burden like me. So my aunt kept my parents' compensation money and sent me to an orphanage. The orphanage was small, with many children and poor conditions. I was always hungry and cold, and I was abused by the irritable staff, always covered in bruises. I shuddered just thinking about those dark days. I thought I would just spend more than a decade muddling through life. Fortunately, the appearance of the Chi family couple was like a ray of light. Like most of the children, I changed into new clothes that I wouldn't even have worn for the new year. Even though the new clothes were loose and didn't fit, I still carefully washed my face. I was malnourished then and didn't look that good. Among the many children, I certainly wasn't outstanding. But I knew that if I missed this opportunity, I didn't know when I would be able to leave the orphanage. While all the children were trying to sell themselves and show off their best qualities, I used my observation skills to learn that the Chi family had a son who was a year older than me. So I stepped forward, timidly looking up at the couple, and the first thing I said was, "Although I'm thin, I'm very capable. I'll never compete with my brother for attention. I'm willing to be my brother's slave for life." The Chi family couple seemed surprised by my words, but then they nodded at me with satisfaction. I knew I had won. It wasn't my humble appearance that changed their minds, but my eyes, which were still bright and sparkling even in this dark place. They wanted a good-looking child, who would have value for marriage in the future. Of course, I only learned the truth when I grew up. When I was taken home by the Chi family couple, I sat in the luxury car all the way, feeling anxious. I was confused about my future. Would that boy like me? Would my adoptive parents like me? I could eat very little and do a lot of work. As long as they didn't send me back, I could endure even if it meant compromising myself. As expected, when my adoptive parents took me by the hand and stood me at the door, a toy flew at my face and hit me right on the bridge of my nose, causing it to bleed. This was Caleb's welcome gift to me. My adoptive parents didn't fly into a rage about it. They just scolded Caleb a few times, not even really scolding him. My adoptive mother said, "It's because we don't have a daughter in our family, Caleb. Don't be so willful." Even though I was young at the time, I could understand what my adoptive mother meant. The Chi family needed a daughter, someone to marry the son of a family of the same class to secure the Chi family's position. But I was still happy. My life had already been ruined, and as long as I had a place to shelter me from the wind and rain, I was willing to do even the dirtiest work. I was still so young. I didn't have the ability to support myself. Caleb sneered at me. After my adoptive parents left, he said to me, "Little runt, do you know why you're here?" I shook my head and then nodded. Perhaps I knew, perhaps I wanted to pretend I didn't. Caleb laughed again, but with a mocking laugh. "You're a pig. You'd even help people count their money after they've sold you. Businessmen never make a loss. Do you think those kinds of people are really so kind that they do charity?" Those kinds of people? What kinds of people? The kind who stand at the top of the pyramid, watching us poor people fighting each other tooth and nail just to survive. But Caleb didn't know that some people are born to be lowly. But it was his words that let me know that he didn't really hate me. Perhaps he was pitying me. I was still timid and answered him in a small voice. I know." Caleb suddenly looked up, his beautiful eyes full of surprise. We stared at each other like that for 3 seconds. He seemed to lose patience and coldly said, "Whatever," before striding away. I stared blankly at Caleb's retreating figure. Even though he was young, he was more mature than his peers. He could see through the essence of things. He was kind, even if his way of expressing it was clumsy and awkward. But I knew that people like him, who were born with a silver spoon in their mouths, were taught Machiavellian tactics from a young age and wouldn't care much about feelings. So I gradually understood Caleb's coldness and aloofness. In the days that followed, Caleb seemed to be determined to go against me. When I ate, he would flip the table. When I went to school, he would deliberately have the driver drop me off first. When I was in class, he would throw my books into the fountain in the garden. When I was barefoot and rolled up my trousers legs to feel around in the water for my things, Caleb couldn't help but run down, pointing at my nose and scolding. "Eleanor, don't you have any dignity? I've bullied you so much. Don't you know to leave the Chi family? The sun was very harsh that day. Even though my lower body was soaked in water, I didn't feel cold. I just stared intently at Caleb. But you've only thrown away my things. You've never hit me or hurt me. Clearly, Caleb didn't expect me to answer like that. He was stunned. Caleb was too kind. He didn't know what real bullying was. It was starving until your stomach cramped, wearing only thin old clothes in winter, freezing until your legs trembled, being locked in a small dark room whether you did something wrong or not, and being whipped with a belt until your skin broke open, the sound of the whipping drowning out the noise outside. That was real bullying. Caleb stomped his feet in anger, leaving behind what he thought was the most vicious thing he could say. You just continue to be a dog for the Chi family. Watching Caleb's exasperated figure, I continued to lower my head and fish my books out of the water. Just a drop of crystal clear tear fell into the water, creating a small ripple. Wasn't I just a dog too? It was just that being a dog in the Chi family was a little more comfortable. From then on, Caleb seemed to be unable to think of any other ways to bully me. During meals, he would also use the excuse that he didn't like to eat meat and push the fatty braised pork in front of me. Also, when I overslept and ran to the car, he would pretend to be angry and say, "How annoying, Martha didn't wake me up again today, making me late." When I got to school, the books and stationery in my desk were brand new. I glanced at Caleb and met his gaze. He awkwardly looked away. I lowered my head, and the corners of my mouth unconsciously turned up. I knew it. Caleb was kind. As for when the two of us started to have different feelings, was it probably just that time had passed and feelings grew? I didn't know. It was just that when I learned that I was going on a blind date with Julian, Caleb lost control for the first time in front of me and my adoptive parents. When I was about to leave, Caleb stood firmly in front of the door, roaring hysterically, "Eleanor, if you dare leave this house, we will never be possible." The expressions of my adoptive parents were complicated. It was the first time that Caleb had shown me his truest feelings for me. But my adoptive father looked at me seriously. "Eleanor, you've been eating and drinking for free in the Chi family for so many years. Do you really think we're doing charity?" I understood what my adoptive father meant. He wouldn't make a loss. What he was telling me was that I couldn't eat for free in the Chi family. With my adoptive father's order, the bodyguards pulled Caleb away. I watched as his fingers were peeled off the door one by one. He roared heart-wrenchingly, and finally could only be locked in the room. On the way to the blind date with Julian, past memories flashed through my mind like a revolving lantern. I felt ashamed because I had fallen in love with Caleb. This forbidden love was not allowed. From the first day I stepped into the Chi family's door, my adoptive father had solemnly instructed me. He said, "Eleanor, we will give you the best education and living conditions, provided that you do not have any thoughts that you should not have about Caleb. I hope you will always be clear about your position." At that time, I was in such a hurry to find a place to belong that I agreed without thinking, and even signed an agreement. When I heard that I was going on a blind date with someone else, my heart ached for the first time. But I knew that apart from a marriage alliance, I had no other choice. When I returned from the blind date, Caleb's room was empty. Only the photo of the two of us was still on the desk. He hadn't taken it with him. At that time, I thought, Caleb probably hated me in his heart. That's good. Hate is always easier than love. "Eleanor, I never heard you say you liked me." Caleb's hoarse voice pulled me back from my thoughts. I gently stroked his hair, but I still couldn't say the words that I liked him. What if I like him? What if I don't like him? After marriage, my heart was already occupied by someone else. Even if it wasn't worth it, I knew that this was my destiny. For the first half of my life, I lived in the Chi family like a maggot in a ditch. Not a single day was for myself, and it was still the same after marriage. Even after death, I couldn't follow my own wishes to reach bliss early. I couldn't bear to watch Caleb staring sadly at the place where I used to live, so I went back to Julian's side again. Julian returned to the single apartment where Victoria lived, and as soon as he entered, Victoria rushed up and hugged him. "Julian, why were you gone for so long? I was so scared alone, afraid that you would abandon me again, afraid that Eleanor would find someone to drive me away. You know, I don't have a home anymore." My heart twitched violently. Julian's hand, which was hovering, finally tightly embraced Victoria's back. He answered in an extremely patient and gentle voice. "Don't worry, didn't you ask me to get something for you? I also brought you the porridge you like to drink the most. Quickly go to the table obediently." Julian coaxed Victoria like a child, and I saw a trace of disdain flashing in Victoria's eyes. Strange, Victoria clearly loves Julian. Why would she have such an expression? Julian watched her with his cheek in his hand while Victoria was drinking porridge. I remembered that in the 5 years that Julian and I were married, I carefully prepared 3 meals a day for Julian, but he always stared at his phone while eating. I told him not to play with his phone while eating. I just wanted to say a few more words to him, and he would always impatiently say, "If I don't handle these things myself, will you handle them? Are you capable? You're just an adopted daughter of the chief family. You don't even have a decent education." Every time, I would clench my fists tightly. It's not that I didn't have a decent education. It's just that I was raised by the chief family from a young age to be a well-behaved and sensible wife from a wealthy family, putting my husband first in everything. But I had no reason to refute, and those grievances were like cotton stuffed in my chest. I couldn't say them. So Julian cannot look at his phone at the table. It's just that the person isn't me. Is Sister Eleanor still throwing a tantrum? Should I go and apologize to her? After all, it's because of me. Victoria put down the spoon and looked at Julian pitifully, with tears in her eyes. How many times has Victoria mentioned me? I looked at Julian, and as expected, he was still disgusted after hearing my name. What did you do wrong? The person who should apologize is her, that selfish ghost. If she hadn't dragged her feet and refused to donate a kidney, she would have almost killed you. You're still thinking about her. To be honest, you're just too kind. What will you do without me by your side in the future? Saying that, Julian raised his hand and brushed away the stray hair on Victoria's forehead. I couldn't help but sneer. What did I do wrong? I just wanted to let myself live. What was wrong with that? Victoria seemed very satisfied with Julian's answer, and excitedly scooped a spoonful of porridge and brought it to Julian's lips, acting cute. "This porridge is very delicious, you try it too." I held my breath and stared blankly at Julian. He was a germaphobe. Once, I just accidentally picked up the wrong cup and drank a sip of water from his cup, and he threw the cup into the trash can. That was the first time I saw Julian so angry. He questioned me. "Don't you have your own cup? Is the water in my cup so fragrant? Don't you know I'm a germaphobe?" Even the quilts we slept with were one for each person. He had his own special bowl. After his cup was thrown away, he would rather drink water from his bowl than use my cup to make do. We have been married for 5 years, and Julian has never kissed me once. Even on the day of the wedding ceremony, when the host asked me to kiss him, he turned his head to avoid it, and impatiently told the host to skip this step. The host and I stood awkwardly on the stage at that time. The host was blank for a moment, but I barely smiled and waved my hand to let him continue. I expected Julian to resist Victoria as he resisted me, but in the next second, Julian unexpectedly drank the porridge without any dislike. My heart suddenly sank to the bottom. Julian doesn't have a germaphobe? He just thinks I'm dirty. I smiled wryly and watched Victoria happily ask Julian if it was delicious. It turns out that a heart dies in an instant. I thought I was despicable enough to be with Julian before my heart was clear, so I tried hard to make up for my guilt towards him and forced myself to fall in love with him. But when I really fell in love with him, I realized that he, like me, also had an impossible person living in his heart. It's just that his past hasn't passed. Julian spent the night with Victoria in the apartment. He didn't sleep peacefully this night. I looked at his knitted eyebrows and the fine sweat on his forehead. I was wondering, what was he dreaming about? Was he dreaming about the dead me? Or was he dreaming about the pain of separating from Victoria in the past? I sat by Julian's bed all night. Ghosts don't need to sleep. When Julian was sleeping, I seemed to hear him faintly say words like, "Eleanor, don't die." Maybe I heard it wrong. How could Julian care about my life or death? The sky gradually brightened, and Victoria was still asleep, with a satisfied smile on her face. Julian glanced at Victoria and got up gently. I only felt ironic. We have been married for 5 years, and he has never considered whether getting up would wake me up. His alarm clock is very loud, and his movements when getting up are very loud. I have difficulty falling asleep in the first place, and I am tormented by illness, so I can barely fall asleep only in the second half of the night. But once I was woken up, I couldn't fall asleep anymore. I had also told Julian about this, but he never remembered it. Julian went out to wash up, but he didn't know why he was staring at his toothbrush in a daze. For 5 years of marriage, I would always help him squeeze the toothpaste and fill the water for brushing his teeth. I knew he was very busy and wanted to let him sleep a little longer, so I wanted to save him some time. At this moment, can he also think of me, who got up early to squeeze his toothpaste, ironed his work clothes, and arranged everything for him? Julian looked at himself in the mirror, and I was standing behind him, but unfortunately he couldn't see me. He hesitated and squeezed the toothpaste himself, but he accidentally squeezed too much toothpaste, and the excess fell on the sink. He was inexplicably irritable, and wanted to take out a paper towel to clean up, but the more he cleaned, the worse it got. It was already late, so he had to brush his teeth hastily and return to the bedroom. At this time, Victoria woke up. She walked behind Julian and hugged his waist, acting cute. "Julian, why did you get up so early?" Victoria's voice was hoarse and intimate with just woken up. Julian was buttoning his buttons, smiled helplessly. "I have to go to work first. You sleep a little longer. I'll arrange for someone to send you breakfast later." "Don't." Victoria acted cute. "I can't sleep. Lie down with me for a while." Julian was buttoning his buttons, smiled helplessly. "I really have something to do at the company." Victoria pouted, as if remembering something, and asked, "Is there still no news about Eleanor?" Mentioning my name again, this time I no longer expected anything. And Julian paused, and said as if he was throwing a tantrum, "No, don't worry about her. I think I've spoiled her too much. She's been playing hide and seek with me for so long." Victoria observed Julian's expression, and said cautiously, "Could something have happened to her? Although she's very excessive. But what could happen to her?" Julian interrupted Victoria, his tone a little rushed. "Her body is very good. The so-called kidney failure before was just an excuse to evade responsibility. Now I don't know where she's hiding, waiting for me to regret begging her, just dreaming." These words were like saying to Victoria, but more like emphasizing to himself. A flash of triumphant joy flashed in Victoria's eyes, but it was quickly covered by worry. "But what if? I know you actually." "There's no what if." Julian suddenly turned around, stared at Victoria, with a serious face. "Victoria, I hope you understand, in my heart, Eleanor is simply incomparable to you. The past 5 years were your and my helplessness. Now everything is back on track, everything is in the past." Julian's speech was very fast, with an almost tyrannical affirmation. I don't know whether to convince Victoria, or to suppress the increasingly strong anxiety in his heart. I bit my back molars tightly. It turns out that Julian agreed to marry me in the first place just to protect the white moonlight in his heart. That's right, at that time, Julian was already struggling to walk at home, and he had no say. Although he was a judge, the Shun family was in business and needed to marry the Chi family to stabilize the Shun family's position. So Julian became the chess piece that could be sacrificed at any time. Victoria's conditions were just average, and the Shun family naturally looked down on her, so the Shun family used Victoria's life as a threat to force Julian to submit. Julian retaliated against me for all the suppression that the Shun family had put on him. How ridiculous. Victoria seemed to be frightened by Julian's attitude, shrank back, her eyes slightly red. "I'm sorry, Julian, I didn't know you sacrificed so much for me, and I didn't mean to make you angry, I just didn't want you to be too stiff with Sister Eleanor because of me. After all, you are legally husband and wife." Victoria deliberately emphasized legally married couple, as if constantly reminding Julian that as long as there wasn't that piece of paper between me and him, Julian could break free. Seeing Victoria's fragile and pitiful appearance, Julian's tone immediately softened. "Silly girl, don't overthink it. The problem between me and her was never just because of you. She's selfish, full of lies, intensely jealous, and her methods are dirty. She's been too disappointing." Julian pulled Victoria into his arms, gently patting her back, as if she were the victim who needed protection. And I, floating in the corner, watched this familiar scene, my heart already a numb wasteland. Once such a scene would have made my heart twist in pain, but now I only felt irony and pity. Julian's embrace, once the haven I longed for, now seemed to me nothing more than a prison built on lies and prejudice. After comforting Victoria, Julian put on his coat and prepared to leave. He walked to the door and subconsciously said, "After I leave, help clean up the bathroom. I accidentally made a mess." Victoria, preoccupied with her thoughts, replied casually, "Don't you have a housekeeper? Just call him over." Julian's steps faltered. He turned to look at Victoria, who was busy playing with her phone. His eyes were dark and unreadable. I wondered if, at that moment, he was remembering me at home, who would tidy up the house without him even asking, keeping everything in perfect order. But Julian only paused for a few seconds before leaving. I followed Julian into the solemn courtroom, watching him wear his robes, sit upright on the judge's bench, his face stern, his words sharp, controlling the rhythm of the trial. He was so professional, reminding me of the day he personally judged me. Having just finished dialysis, I had just returned home, looking at the mess on the floor, the chaotic dining table, a sofa full of dirty clothes. I pulled down my sleeves, trying to cover the needle marks, and began to clean up with my weak body. The memory of Julian threatening me to donate a kidney the day before yesterday was still vivid, making my heart ache. Although I refused, I thought Julian would give up, but a moment later, there was a knock on the door. The court notice was delivered directly into my hands. My mind went blank, my ears buzzing, unable to hear the surrounding sounds. I forgot how I managed to reach the courthouse in a daze. Julian sat on the judge's bench as seriously as he did now, looking at me coldly. Julian hired the most powerful lawyer, a lawyer who had never lost a case in his career, and I didn't even have time to find a lawyer for myself, so I could only find a novice in the courtroom. My defense lawyer seemed cramped and nervous under all sorts of unreasonable clauses, and the result was undoubtedly a loss. When I was forcibly taken to the hospital, I grabbed the corner of Julian's robe, begging, "I have kidney failure. I really can't donate a kidney." Afraid that Julian wouldn't believe me, I raised my sleeve in front of him for the first time, my arm covered with blue needle marks, so shocking that even the people in the audience gasped. I had hidden my illness because I didn't want Julian to worry, but I never thought he would force me to reveal the truth in this way. I thought Julian would be moved, would unconditionally believe me, but the look in his eyes was as if he were looking at a cockroach. He frowned. "Eleanor, I used to think you were just a selfish and self-serving beast, but I didn't expect you to not only be full of lies, but also try to deceive me, to deceive the jury, by hurting yourself. Why don't you just die?" When I was taken away by the bailiffs, my body was limp, my strength seeming to have been drained away in that instant, powerless, pale. It was in this courtroom that my dignity, my personality, were all personally strangled by Julian. So being here at this moment gave me a physiological rejection. But my soul can't leave Julian for long, otherwise it feels like being electrocuted. Yes, souls can feel pain too. The court was hearing an economic dispute case. The lawyers on both sides were engaged in a fierce battle of words, and Julian keenly captured every detail, making a fair judgment. But he could clearly and rationally make judgments when facing strangers. Why, when it came to me, did he not believe anything I said? Or was it that he was already prejudiced? Looking at him like this, I vaguely saw the calm and wise judge who had made me fall in love with him. Once upon a time, I was attracted to his unique temperament, thinking I had found a soulmate to entrust my life to, even though I buried the fiery and somewhat disreputable feelings of my youth deep in my heart. But now, I knew clearly that this fairness had never truly come to me. In the courtroom where Julian judged me, the evidence was his one-sided accusation. The lawyer was hired to ensure my defeat, and the judge was his already biased heart. During the mid-trial recess, Julian returned to his office, rubbing his forehead. His assistant brought him a cup of coffee and mentioned, "Judge Julian, a package your wife sent to the court has been in the mailroom for a long time. Would you like me to bring it up for you?" Julian was stunned. "A package? When did this happen?" "About a month ago. At that time you were busy with Ms. Victoria's surgery. And the lawsuit, so I didn't bother you. A month ago, that was when I had already died. It seemed Caleb had sent it in my name." Julian frowned, as if talking to himself. What is she up to again? Is there anything she can't say at home? Why waste my working time? My soul trembled. Victoria would often send him trivial little things, and he would patiently unpack them, take pictures, and post them on his social media. How could it be that when it came to me, important documents were a waste of his time? Julian still asked his assistant to fetch the package. When the package arrived, the outer packaging had already been carefully removed by the assistant, leaving only a document bag. As Julian reached in hesitantly to take it out, I saw the words medical certificate written on the paper. My breath caught. I didn't expect Caleb to send my medical certificate to Julian after all. But this time, I didn't expect Julian's reaction. However, I didn't see Julian's reaction because Victoria ran in the next moment. Julian, I'm so bored alone. I came to find you to play. Julian casually threw the document aside, and the gust of wind that Victoria brought in knocked the document into the gap in the desk. I instinctively reached out to catch it, but the document passed directly through the palm of my hand and fell into a place where no one could see it. You stay here obediently for a while, and after this lawsuit is over, I'll take you to your favorite restaurant. Victoria nodded obediently and sat in Julian's chair, flipping through Julian's things casually. Julian didn't blame Victoria, but continued the court session with his assistant. I smiled bitterly. I still remembered the time Julian had left his documents at home, and I was afraid he would be worried, so I ran to Julian's office to deliver them. Julian was still in court, so I put the documents on his desk. Seeing that his desk was covered in dust, I helped him wipe it, and when Julian came back and saw me, Julian's first reaction was not surprise, but blame. Who told you to enter my office without permission? Who told you to touch my things? Can you afford to take responsibility if something is lost? In an instant, I felt like a child who had done something wrong, and immediately took out the documents he had left behind, saying carefully, "You left your things at home. I brought them to you." Julian snatched the documents from my hand, and the edge of the paper cut my finger, and blood quickly seeped out, but Julian ignored it and said impatiently, "Can't you just call a delivery service? Is this the kind of place someone like you can just enter?" In that moment, the feelings of inferiority and shame flooded my mind, and I was at a loss. In the end, it was Julian's assistant who sent me out, patiently explaining to me, "Madam, please don't mind. Judge Julian has been a little busy lately, and may be under a lot of pressure. He's definitely not targeting you." Even if he said that, I knew that Julian wouldn't bring work matters into his life. He just purely didn't like me. The kindness released by a stranger was better than my own husband. From then on, I never went to Julian's office again, and Victoria could not only enter Julian's office at will, but also flip through his things casually. At this time, he was not afraid of losing his important documents. Julian's rules were always made for me. Victoria was spinning in Julian's chair, looking bored in his office. Her eyes swept over the mountain of case files on the desk, and her lips pursed, clearly showing that she had no interest in these things. She casually opened a drawer, flipping through the small objects inside, like a spoiled child exploring her own territory. When she picked up a delicate pen case, a hint of greed flashed in her eyes, but she quickly returned to her innocent and harmless expression. I floated to the side, watching her performance with a cold eye. This woman who had once made my husband infatuated looked so hypocritical and pretentious in my eyes. Every subtle expression, every seemingly unintentional movement, revealed the traces of her careful calculation. Julian's office is so boring, it doesn't even have a decent decoration, Victoria said to herself, putting the pen case back in its place and turning to the bookcase. My gaze unconsciously drifted to the document bag that had been forgotten in the desk crevice. The medical certificate that could prove my innocence and prove that I was indeed terminally ill. It lay quietly in the darkness, like the pain and grievances that were not seen in my lifetime. If Julian had seen this document then, how would he have reacted? Would he have believed me? Would he have felt a little remorse for what he had done? These questions swirled in my mind, but I quickly laughed at myself. Does the answer still matter at this point? Even if he knew the truth, he would probably, as usual, find all sorts of reasons to prove that I was lying, trying to gain sympathy. After wandering around the office, Victoria seemed to be bored and sat down in Julian's chair, taking out her phone to play. She stared intently at the screen, her fingers sliding quickly, and a smug smile appeared on her face from time to time. I didn't know what she was looking at, nor was I interested. My attention was drawn to a commotion outside the office door. "Judge Julian, this urgent document needs your immediate signature." "I'm busy right now. I'll deal with it after the recess." "But the other lawyer insists on getting it today," I said after the court adjourns. Julian's tone was clearly impatient. The assistant didn't dare say more, and the sound of his footsteps gradually faded away. Through the wall, I saw Julian standing at the end of the hallway, his back to the office, his shoulders slightly heaving. He rarely showed such emotion at work. Even when facing the most difficult cases, he could maintain a superficial calm. What was making him so agitated? Was it that inexplicable package of mine, or Victoria's sudden visit? Or perhaps, was some corner deep within his heart, a corner he refused to acknowledge, feeling uneasy about my disappearance? The moment the thought arose, I squashed it. "Stop being so sentimental, Eleanor. You already paid for that unrealistic fantasy with your life." Julian took a deep breath, straightened his robe, and walked back to the courtroom. His back was still straight, his steps still firm, as if that moment of losing control had never happened. I followed him back to the courtroom, watching him retake the judge's seat and continue the trial. His voice was clear and powerful, his logic airtight, and his grasp of the case accurate and thorough. People in the audience nodded from time to time, clearly recognizing his professional competence. This was Julian, a woman who was impeccable in her career. He could fight for the maximum rights of a stranger, but refused to give his own husband the most basic trust and respect. The trial ended at 3 in the afternoon. Julian announced a recess, to continue tomorrow. He wearily rubbed his temples and got up from the judge's seat. "Judge Julian, you worked hard today." Julian just nodded without responding. He hurried back to his office, and when he pushed open the door, Victoria immediately jumped up from her chair and greeted him. "Julian, you're finally done. I've been so bored waiting for you," she said coquettishly, reaching out to take Julian's arm. Julian subtly avoided her touch and walked to his desk to start organizing documents. "Victoria, didn't I tell you not to come to my workplace without permission?" His tone was calm, but with an unquestionable seriousness. Victoria's smile froze on her face, and she quickly put on a look of grievance. "I just wanted to give you a surprise. And I'm so bored alone in the apartment, and you won't let me go out. Your body hasn't fully recovered, you need to rest." Julian replied without looking up, continuing to organize the documents on his desk. My soul floated to his side, watching him skillfully classify and file all kinds of documents. His fingers were long and slender. How I once longed for those hands to gently caress my face, instead of always pushing me away, scolding me. "I know I was wrong, I won't do it again next time," Victoria said quietly, but her eyes restlessly darted towards Julian. "Can we go eat now? I'm really hungry." Julian finally looked up and glanced at her, his eyes complex. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but in the end, just sighed. "Wait for me for 10 more minutes. I'll finish processing these documents." "Okay, I'll wait for you." Victoria immediately beamed and sat obediently on the sofa. Julian sat back down and started flipping through documents. His gaze inadvertently swept across the desk, his brow furrowed, as if he was looking for something. Was he looking for that medical report? My heart couldn't help but jump. He reached out and felt around on the desk for a while, then opened the drawer and looked, finally shaking his head as if giving up the search. That document that could reveal the truth was forgotten in a corner, like the pain that was never valued when I was alive. "Okay, let's go." Julian stood up, picked up his coat and bag. Victoria immediately jumped up and took his bag eagerly. "Let me take it." Julian did not object, letting her take his bag, and the two walked out of the office one after the other. I followed them to the underground parking lot, watching Julian open the passenger door for Victoria, watching him skillfully fasten her seat belt, watching them prepare to have dinner like a real couple. This scene stung my eyes. Once upon a time, I had also sat in that seat, with trepidation and anticipation, going with Julian to see his friends or family. But every time, he would remind me before arriving at the destination. "Say less, don't embarrass me." How ironic. As a husband, I was not even as good as an ambiguous object around him. The car drove out of the parking lot, merging into the evening traffic. Julian focused on driving, while Victoria babbled about interesting things, trying to make him happy. And then the waiter actually spilled red wine all over the guest. Ha ha ha. You didn't see the scene at the time. Julian seemed absent-minded, only occasionally humming in response. Julian, what's wrong with you today? You don't seem happy. Nothing, just a little tired. Is it because Eleanor hasn't contacted you, and you're worried? Hearing my name, Julian's hand on the steering wheel tightened. Don't mention her. His voice turned cold. Okay, I won't mention it. Victoria wisely shut up, but a smug smile curled at the corner of her mouth. Watching this scene, I only felt pitiful. Julian would rather believe this man full of lies than face the fact that I may have met with an accident. The car stopped in front of a high-end restaurant, and the waiter immediately came forward to open the door for Julian. After he got out of the car, he habitually straightened his collar, a gesture I used to be very familiar with. Every time before going out, he would adjust his appearance to ensure that he appeared in front of others in the most perfect image. Judge Julian, good evening. The restaurant manager came out to greet him personally. Obviously he was a regular here. The usual spot. Julian nodded slightly. Of course, please follow me. They were led to a window seat with a view of the city's night scene. The twinkling lights were like scattered stars, and once Julian and I had dined at such a height, but then his gaze never truly rested on me. What would you like to eat? Julian handed the menu to Victoria. I want this and this. Victoria excitedly pointed at the dishes, without worrying about the price. Julian said nothing, just quietly watching her. His eyes were somewhat erratic, as if looking through her at something else. When the waiter left, Victoria suddenly asked, Julian, when are you planning to divorce Eleanor? This question was so direct that even I was surprised. Julian was visibly stunned, picked up his water glass and took a sip, not answering immediately. I mean, she doesn't even know where she's gone now. Isn't this perfect? Victoria continued. We can start over, just like before. Victoria, let's talk about these things later. Julian's tone carried a warning. Why wait? Victoria pouted unhappily. You obviously don't love her. Why let a marriage contract bind you? I know you married her in the first place to protect me, but that's not necessary now, is it? Julian's gaze swept sharply towards her. How do you know I don't love her? This question not only stunned Victoria, but also shocked me. This was the first time Julian had asked such a question in front of someone else, maybe even in front of himself. Victoria quickly recovered her composure and laughed. If you loved her, how could you let her donate a kidney to me? How could you sue her? Julian, stop deceiving yourself. Julian was silent for a moment, gazing at the window with a complex expression. The city's neon lights flickered in his eyes, but couldn't penetrate his unfathomable pupils. Order food, I'm hungry. He ultimately avoided the topic. Victoria seemed to want to say something, but seeing Julian's face, she wisely chose to shut up. Dinner proceeded in a subtle atmosphere. Victoria kept bringing up topics, trying to liven things up, but Julian's responses were always cold. He ate very little, but drank a lot of wine, one glass after another. His cheeks flushed slightly, and his eyes gradually became blurred. Julian, drink less. What? Even you want to control me? Julian raised his eyebrows at her, his tone provocative. That's not what I mean. I'm just worried about your health. My health is fine. I don't need anyone to worry about me. Julian poured another glass of wine and drank it all in one gulp. Looking at him like this, I felt unfamiliar. Julian had always been restrained, rarely losing his composure in front of outsiders. Even at home, he always maintained a certain sobriety and distance. What made him so abnormal tonight? Was it my disappearance, or Victoria's questioning? Or was it some part of him that had been suppressed deep down, finally beginning to rebel? After dinner, Julian was already a little unsteady on his feet. Victoria helped him out of the restaurant, and after the waiter brought the car over, she naturally took the keys. I'll drive, you rest for a while. Julian didn't object, got into the passenger seat, and closed his eyes. The car drove smoothly on the way back to the apartment, and the car was silent. Victoria occasionally turned her head to look at Julian, her eyes full of possessiveness and calculation. Julian, she whispered, let's go home. Home. Which home? The home where Julian and I lived together for 5 years. Or the bachelor apartment he prepared for Victoria? The answer was obvious. The car finally stopped in front of the apartment building I had never set foot in. Victoria helped Julian out of the car and into the elevator. I followed them, watching the elevator numbers rise, finally stopping on the 18th floor. The apartment door was opened, and the inside was brightly lit. Unlike our cold home with Julian, this place was full of life. A blanket casually thrown on the sofa, half-eaten snacks on the coffee table, photos on the TV cabinet. Photos. I floated closer to take a look, and my heart suddenly contracted. Those were photos of Julian and Victoria together, looking like they were taken a few years ago. In the photos, Julian smiled brightly, his eyes full of love, clinging tightly to Victoria's side. I had never seen this expression on his face, even when we were newly married. So he could really love someone like that. It's just that person wasn't me. Victoria helped Julian to sit on the sofa and poured him a glass of water. Drink some water, it'll make you feel better. Julian took the water glass, but didn't drink it, just staring blankly ahead. Victoria, he suddenly said, his voice hoarse. Do you think Eleanor will really have an accident? Victoria's body stiffened noticeably, but quickly returned to normal. What kind of accident can she have? She must be hiding somewhere, wanting you to worry. Aren't you the most clear about her little tricks? But this time is different. Julian lowered his head, his long hair obscuring his expression. She's been missing for over a month. I can't reach her by phone. She doesn't reply to WeChat. Even Caleb says she won't be back. Hearing my name spoken from his mouth, with a tone I had never heard before, my soul couldn't help but tremble. What was that? Worry? Regret? Or fear? Can Caleb's words be trusted? He's always been hostile to you, wishing you and Eleanor would break up. Don't think so much. She'll come back when she's had enough fun. Victoria sat down next to Julian and gently put her arm around his shoulders. Julian didn't push her away, but didn't lean on her either, just sitting quietly. You know, he said softly, I dreamed about her yesterday. My heart jumped. Dreamed about her? Dreamed about Eleanor? Victoria's tone was a little nervous. Yeah. Julian nodded. I dreamed that she was covered in blood, standing in front of me, asking me why I didn't believe her. His voice became lower and lower, eventually becoming almost a whisper. It's just a dream. It doesn't mean anything. See, you're just too tired. That's why you had such a nightmare. Is that so? Julian raised his head, looking at her with bewildered eyes. But that dream was too real. So real that I could smell the blood. Don't think about it. Go take a shower and get a good night's sleep. Victoria interrupted him, stood up and wanted to pull him up. But Julian broke away from her hand. Victoria, he looked directly into her eyes. Are you sure Eleanor hired someone to hurt you? This question was like a heavy hammer, hitting not only Victoria, but also me. This was the first time Julian had questioned her accusations. Victoria's expression instantly became aggrieved and hurt, but quickly returned to normal. Julian, what do you mean by that? Do you think I'm lying? I just want to confirm. Julian's tone was surprisingly calm. After all, there's no solid evidence for those things. Evidence? Aren't the wounds on my body the best evidence? Victoria excitedly rolled up her sleeves, revealing a few faint scars on her arms. And those harassing phone calls and text messages, did I make them all up? Julian looked at those scars, his eyes flickering. I remembered those injuries. Victoria had accidentally fallen and injured herself, but at the time she insisted that I had hired someone to beat her. And Julian, without even investigating, believed her words. I know you're in a bad mood because of that dream, but you can't suspect me because of it. Victoria's voice was tearful. I love you so much. How could I lie to you? Classic Victoria performance. Whenever facing accusations, she would play the role of the victim, using emotional blackmail to divert the topic. To my surprise, this time Julian didn't immediately appease her. He just quietly watched her perform, with a look of scrutiny I had never seen before. Victoria, he said slowly, if one day I find out you lied to me, what will happen? Victoria's expression froze, but only for a moment. She returned to that pitiful look. How could I lie to you? Julian, did you hear some gossip? Was it Caleb? Or did Eleanor say something to you before she disappeared? Julian didn't answer, just stood up and walked towards the bathroom. I'm going to take a shower. Watching his leaving figure, Victoria's expression gradually darkened. She stared at the bathroom door, her eyes full of unease and anger. I floated in front of her, trying to read more information from her eyes. How many secrets are hidden by this woman I have always regarded as a rival? Is her affection for Julian love, or just exploitation and possession? The sound of water came from the bathroom. Julian was washing away the alcohol and fatigue. And in the living room, Victoria took out her phone, quickly typed a paragraph of text, and then deleted it. Her movements were sneaky, obviously not wanting Julian to find out. Who was she contacting? Why was she being so secretive? Curiosity drove me to pass through the wall and enter the bathroom. Julian stood under the shower, letting the hot water wash over his body. His eyes were closed, and it was hard to tell if the water on his face was water or tears. Eleanor. I heard him softly calling my name. At this moment, my soul seemed to be torn apart. Why? Why is it only now that he's starting to show that he cares about me? If he had, even just a little bit, believed me, cared about me, would there have been a different ending between us? The sound of water stopped, and Julian walked out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel. His cheeks were flushed from the heat, but his eyes were still dazed. I'll sleep in the guest room, he said to Victoria, then walked straight to another room. Victoria clearly hadn't expected this development, and hurried to follow. Julian, why? Aren't we? I'm tired and want to be alone. Julian interrupted her, and closed the guest room door. Victoria stood outside the door, her face ashen. She raised her hand to knock, but in the end, she didn't. Good night, Julian, she said to the door, her voice gentle, but her expression was twisted. I stayed in the living room, watching this woman with her superb acting skills drop her disguise. She paced around the room agitatedly, glancing at the guest room door from time to time, her eyes full of unwillingness and anger. Finally, she took out her phone, went to the balcony and dialed a number. It's me, he said, lowering his voice. Something's not quite right. Julian is starting to suspect. I don't know, he asked a lot of strange questions today. Are you sure you didn't leave any traces? Who was she talking to? What were they plotting? I tried to hear more, but Victoria quickly ended the call and returned to the living room. She sat on the sofa, turned on the TV, and watched the screen absent-mindedly. The night deepened, and the whole city fell asleep. And I, this soul with nowhere to go, could only wander in this apartment full of lies. In the guest room, Julian lay in bed, staring at the ceiling with open eyes. His phone screen was lit, displaying my phone number. He dialed it again and again, listening to the cold recorded message. His eyes gradually filled with despair. Eleanor, where are you? He murmured to himself. I'm right here beside you, Julian. I've always been here, but you can't see me, and you can't hear me. At 3 a.m, Julian finally fell asleep. I stood by the bed, watching his restless sleeping face. His brow was furrowed, and his lips trembled slightly, as if he were talking in his sleep. I leaned closer, wanting to hear what he was saying. I'm sorry. Eleanor. I'm sorry. This apology comes too late, Julian. Justice delayed is not justice, and a late apology cannot bring the dead back to life. The morning sun shone into the room through the gaps in the curtains, and Julian woke up. He sat up, rubbed his throbbing temples, and looked around the room in confusion, seemingly unable to remember where he was for a moment. When he was fully awake, he quickly got up, got dressed, and gently opened the door. In the living room, Victoria was asleep on the sofa, the TV still on. Julian glanced at her, didn't wake her, and walked straight to the door. Julian. Victoria was awakened by the sound of the door closing, and hurriedly got up. I'm going to work. You get some rest. Wait, I'll drive you. No need. Julian interrupted her, opened the door, and walked out. Victoria chased to the door, but the elevator doors had already closed. She angrily punched the wall and cursed softly. I followed Julian to the underground parking lot, watching him get into his car, but he didn't start the engine immediately. He lay on the steering wheel, his shoulders trembling slightly. Was he crying? For whom? For me, or for the shaky trust between him and Victoria? A few minutes later, Julian raised his head, wiped away his tears, and reapplied his makeup. When he looked in the mirror again, the once capable and decisive Julian was back. I thought Julian would go straight to the company, but unexpectedly he called Caleb. I'm at the coffee shop downstairs from your office. Is it convenient to meet? I couldn't hear what Caleb said, but judging by the direction Julian was driving, Caleb probably agreed. When the two sat face to face, I saw that Caleb seemed to have lost a lot of weight, and there were heavy dark circles under his eyes. My heart still tightened. What's wrong? Did you see the thing I sent you? Julian was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized. You sent that document. As he said that, Julian grabbed Caleb's hand. Where's Eleanor? I can't reach her. Tell her I forgive her. As long as she's willing to come back, everything that happened back then will be written off. Caleb scoffed and shook off Julian's hand. It seems you haven't opened it yet. Julian was surprised. What exactly is it? Caleb took a sip of his coffee, took out a 100 yuan bill, slapped it on the table, and stood up. Decide whether you want to look for Eleanor after you've seen it. I'm busy, and I don't have time to waste time with Judge Julian. As he said that, Caleb ignored Julian's attempts to stop him and left. Julian stared blankly out the window. I didn't know what he was thinking, and I never thought that the always high and mighty Julian would actually beg someone for me, but he clearly still thought there was something wrong with me just now. Julian sat in the coffee shop for a long time, long enough for the coffee to get cold and leave dark stains on the cup, before he finally got up and left. This time Julian still didn't go back to the court, but drove to the house where I and he had lived together for 5 years. When he opened the door, an even stronger smell of dust rushed over him. The rotten and moldy dishes on the dining table remained as they were, only covered with a thin layer of dust. The whole house was eerily quiet, with no sign of life. He stood at the door, hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The crisp echo of high heels on the floor was particularly jarring in this silent space. Eleanor. He tentatively called out, his voice echoing in the empty room, with no response. He slowly walked into the living room, his eyes scanning every corner. The pillows on the sofa were still in the same position I had left them in. The TV remote control was in its usual spot on the coffee table, and even the books I often read were neatly stacked on the bookshelf. Everything remained as it was when I last left the house, only covered in a layer of dust. Julian's brow furrowed even tighter, and he quickly walked to the bedroom and pushed open the door. The bed was perfectly made, my clothes were still hanging in the closet, and my toothbrush and towel were in their usual places on the washstand. All of these signs indicated that I hadn't left with a plan, but rather disappeared suddenly. He took out his phone and dialed my number again, still getting the message that it was turned off. This time, he didn't hang up angrily as usual, but listened to the cold voice prompt, his eyes gradually turning panicky. No way. She must be deliberately trying to scare me. He muttered to himself, but the uncertainty in his tone grew stronger and stronger. He began to rummage through the room, as if trying to find some clue I had left behind. He opened the bedside table drawer, and our marriage certificate and some important documents were neatly placed inside. He picked up the marriage certificate, opened it, and looked at my slightly reserved smile in the photo, gently stroking my face with his finger. That photo was taken under pressure from the Chi family. At the time, Julian's face was cold the whole time, while I tried to force a smile, trying to make the photo look happier. The photographer repeatedly asked Julian to smile, but he just impatiently said, "Hurry up and finish shooting. I have a court session this afternoon." Now he stared at that photo for a long time, his eyes complex. The package. Julian seemed to finally remember the package Caleb had mentioned at this moment. He didn't stay long in our wedding room, immediately grabbed his car keys and ran to the office. "Judge Julian, there's an important trial to be held this afternoon, and there's a dinner party in the evening." The assistant, seeing Julian running in, stepped forward with the documents, but was angrily interrupted by Julian. "From now on, I don't have any free time. Push everything back." "But, did I hire you to create problems for me?" The assistant was frightened by Julian's roar, and had to agree. Although the former Julian was serious about his work, he had never seen him scold anyone like this. Abnormal, it's too abnormal. Julian rushed into the office and began rummaging through everything, turning his once tidy desk into a complete mess. Unfortunately, Julian didn't find what he was looking for. He sat down on the floor, deflated, and I couldn't help but find it amusing. What good is it to realize this now? The next moment, Julian's eyes lit up. I followed his gaze and saw the diagnosis report that had fallen into a crack. Julian knelt, struggling to pull the diagnosis report out. His white shirt got dirty, but he didn't care. Finally, he got it out. As Julian opened it, his hands began to tremble. The diagnosis report slipped from his grasp and fell to the ground. The diagnosis report clearly stated, late-stage chronic renal failure. Julian staggered back a step, leaning against the wall, his face pale. She was really sick. Julian said softly, his voice trembling. I floated in front of him, watching him like this, feeling no joy, only endless sorrow. Why did it have to come to this before he was willing to face the evidence that had been right in front of him all along? Judge Julian, your package. His assistant walked in cautiously, probably still shaken from being yelled at by Julian earlier. His voice was filled with fear. Julian walked over like a zombie, took the package and opened it. It was a diary. Since I found out I was sick, I had made it a habit to record my daily life and the changes in my condition in it. Julian trembled as he opened the diary and read through it page by page. It recorded the dates and feelings of each dialysis session, the pain during attacks, my unspoken love and fear for him, and the helplessness and grievances I felt when Victoria framed me again and again. March 15th, I went for dialysis again today. The nurse said my blood vessels are getting worse and worse. Julian came home very late tonight, smelling of alcohol. He said he had a dinner with colleagues. I didn't dare tell him I went to the hospital today, afraid he would find me annoying. April 2nd, Victoria came to the company to find me again, saying in front of all my colleagues that I had sent people to beat her up. Julian rushed over and slapped me without saying a word. Why does he never believe me? April 28th, the doctor said I need to have a kidney transplant as soon as possible, otherwise my condition will worsen. I don't dare tell Julian, he's already very upset about Victoria's illness lately. May 10th, today is our 5th wedding anniversary. I prepared his favorite dishes, but he never came home. At 10 o'clock at night, I received a subpoena from the court. He sued me, forcing me to donate a kidney to Victoria. What should I do? The diary ended there, the night before the forced surgery. Julian collapsed to the ground, the diary slipping from his hands. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking violently. I didn't know. I really didn't know. He sobbed uncontrollably. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell me? Why? Because every time I tried to confide in you, you would impatiently cut me off. Because every time I showed vulnerability, you would disdainfully say I was useless. Because in your heart, I was never as important as Victoria. I had wanted to say these words to him so many times, but now they were meaningless. Julian stumbled to his feet and called Caleb again. Where? Where is Eleanor now? Perhaps Julian hadn't realized that I was dead. Or perhaps he had, but he just refused to accept it. You're her husband, not me. You should ask yourself. Although Caleb didn't answer directly, he did hint at it. Julian hung up and rushed to the hospital. After getting out of the car, Julian wandered aimlessly through the hospital corridors, grabbing every nurse he passed to look at them. I knew Julian was looking for the nurse who had told him the truth last time, the one he had threatened. Finally, Julian found her. He opened his mouth almost pleadingly. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have scared you last time. Can you tell me where Eleanor is? Where is my wife? The nurse was obviously frightened by Julian, or still shaken by being threatened last time. She trembled as she said, Eleanor passed away on the operating table a month and a half ago. The body? I don't know who took the body. Julian collapsed to the ground instantly. The nurse looked at Julian in surprise, at a loss for what to do. Luckily, a colleague called her away. Julian stood there, frozen, for a long time. Maybe he remembered the last phone call I made to him from the operating table, desperate and helpless. Or maybe Julian remembered the day Caleb passed him with my body. Julian rushed out of the hospital like a madman, but Julian went to Victoria's place. I couldn't help but find it ridiculous. I thought that Julian would at least feel some guilt after learning of my death, but to him, even my dead self couldn't compare to Victoria. But when he arrived at the apartment, the door was ajar. Julian stopped and listened to the voices inside. Are you guys done yet? I already gave you the money, didn't I? If you keep this up, I'm calling the police. Victoria's assertive voice came out. Julian instinctively reached out to push the door open. But just as his hand touched the doorknob, the man inside sneered. You think 20,000 yuan is enough to get rid of us? Don't you know the person we were going to scam was a judge? He almost killed us. You either give us another 500,000, or we'll go to Julian and reveal the truth, and let Julian see your true colors. Julian looked through the crack in the door. I also looked, and when I saw the faces of those men, my soul shuddered. They were the thugs Victoria had accused me of sending to beat her up. However, Victoria didn't realize that Julian was already standing outside. She impatiently took out a bank card and threw it at the thugs. This is all the savings I have. Take it or leave it. Take the money and get out of this city. Don't let me see you again. The leader, a man with a scar, smiled lewdly. Your simp is so rich and still pining for you. But you're so poor you can't even come up with 500,000. You're a real loser. Victoria rolled her eyes at them. If I didn't marry him, I'd still be an outsider. I have no right to inherit anything of his. What do you know? It's called playing the long game. Yes, Victoria would always look for Julian, but even if she was struggling financially, she wouldn't ask him for money. She was smart. First, if I were to investigate, he would have to return the marital assets we shared. Second, she could leave a good, unmaterialistic impression on Julian. The thugs laughed and waved the bank card. Call us again if you have any more jobs like this. We're old acquaintances. We'll give you a discount. The rumors we spread in your company for you worked pretty well, right? Victoria was losing patience and just urged them. Get out of here. He's about to come and bring me things. Remember, keep your mouth shut, or you'll suffer. You've probably seen Julian's methods before. When the thugs opened the door, they saw Julian standing there with a gloomy face. They were scared stiff and scurried away. A crack appeared in Victoria's face. Perhaps Victoria wasn't sure how much Julian had heard. She quickly rushed into Julian's arms, looking pitiful. Julian, Eleanor still won't let me go. She even sent those thugs to bother me. I'm so scared, Julian. Julian smiled self-deprecatingly, his cold voice coming from above Victoria's head. Eleanor is dead. Where is she going to find thugs for you? Victoria, have you been acting for so long that you've even convinced yourself? Victoria's body suddenly stiffened. Realizing that she had no way to defend herself, she let go of Julian and took a step back, sneering. Wasn't I doing all this for you? Why did you marry that bitch so quickly after I left? What's wrong with me? I just accepted money from your father. Julian, you were using Eleanor's feelings while messing around with me. Don't you think you're a hypocrite too? Thinking back to how long I had been married to Julian, I had never said a harsh word to him, but I should have said these things to him a long time ago. Julian slapped Victoria. I never hit women, but you've gone this far. I was blind. I'll give you two choices. Either you get out of this city right now, or you dig out Eleanor's kidneys and go die with her. Victoria was scared. She knew Julian's methods, of course, I knew them even better. It was true that Julian said he never hit women. He would have others torture me. I still remember when Victoria said I sent people to bully her. Julian called people over without saying a word and held me down in the bathroom of our marital home, surrounded by a group of thugs. Julian quietly moved a chair and sat in front of me. He looked at me coldly. Since you like to use such low-down methods, I'll let you know what it's like to get what you give. That night, I was beaten by a group of thugs, breaking 2 of my ribs, and my body was covered in bruises. At first, I insisted on not admitting that I had sent people to bully Victoria, but Julian just ordered the thugs to hit me harder. I was afraid of pain, especially afraid of pain. So under Julian's repeated questioning, I went from vehemently denying it to remaining silent. The thugs were probably afraid of causing a death, so they didn't dare to continue after I fainted. I escaped by a hair's breadth. I still remember the memory of that day clearly. Actually, Julian didn't care about the truth at all. He believed whatever Victoria said. Now that he was being deceived, could he feel even a fraction of the pain I felt back then? At this time, Victoria immediately took out her luggage and fled in the middle of the night under Julian's threat. But on the way, Victoria was hit by an oncoming car and died on the spot. When I learned of this news, I didn't feel much of a reaction. Victoria and I were both unloved. Victoria had fought me for so many years, using any means necessary. Victoria was just trying to prove to me how much Julian loved her, but she was wrong. Julian only loved himself. After Victoria died, Julian didn't have much of a reaction. He just said I know to the person who notified him. After all, Julian was anxious to find my body, but what good would it do even if he found it? Julian rummaged through his house before finally finding Caleb's phone number. After the call went through, Julian asked anxiously, "Where? Where is Eleanor's body?" Caleb seemed much calmer, not using harsh words or questioning Julian, just smiling helplessly. "I thought you'd never think of Eleanor in your life. After all, you were busy taking care of your white moonlight. It seems Eleanor's death can still awaken your conscience." Julian couldn't listen to any of it, and repeated his question again. Caleb just said coldly, "If you have the ability, come find it yourself, but I think Eleanor doesn't want to see you." That's right, I really didn't want to see Julian. The man who didn't care about my life or death, who never trusted me. What was there to see? If he appeared at my grave, he would only dirty my path to reincarnation. The call was hung up. Julian broke down. He threw his phone on the ground, shattering it to pieces. He squatted down, grabbing his hair, looking heartbroken. Is it guilt? Is it regret? Or is it sadness? All of this has long lost its meaning for me. I gave Julian many chances. I thought he loved me, so I gave him everything without reservation. But reality still slapped me hard in the face. It made me think of when we first met. Actually, when I first saw him, I didn't know he was the young lady of the Shin family, and he didn't know I was the adopted daughter of the Chi family. At that time, I went to the blind date as agreed, but I drank too much water on the way and suddenly needed to pee, so I ran to a coffee shop, but the waiter told me that only customers here could use it. Helpless, I thought about buying a coffee. Unexpectedly, there were many people in line, and Julian happened to be first in line. He looked back at me and said, "Baby, why are you so late? Go to the bathroom first, I'll pay." Julian was wearing a white dress at that time. Tall and thin, with a good appearance, it was hard not to be moved. I knew Julian was helping me out, so I went along with the situation and ran to the toilet. When I came out, Julian was still there, holding the latte I had just ordered in his hand. I gratefully transferred money to him, but Julian was not polite. He opened the QR code, and when I scanned it with my phone, I found it was a friend verification. The way adults interact is sometimes direct. I transferred the money to Julian, but he didn't accept it, and instead asked me to treat him to dinner. At the time, I was thinking that a cup of coffee was only a few tens of yuan, but a meal would cost several hundred. After we got together, Julian never mentioned Victoria to me. I thought we were both love at first sight, and we naturally got along. We got married after dating for half a year. But after the marriage, Victoria came back. From the beginning, I felt that the two of them were not right, but later Victoria's provocation became more and more obvious. And I finally realized that in Julian's past, there was a white moonlight that he would protect with his life. How ironic. As time went by, my soul seemed to become transparent. In the days that followed, Julian quit his job and drank all day at home. The floor was full of empty bottles. I was suffocated and wanted to escape, but I wanted to see how Julian would live without me even more. During Julian's few sober moments, he carefully washed the dishes, made my favorite dishes, and set 2 sets of cutlery. I just sat quietly opposite Julian. It's laughable to say, but after 5 years of marriage, Julian had never cooked me a meal. Only when I didn't need it did he start to make up for it. Belated affection is cheaper than grass. Julian looked at the empty space opposite him, and began to talk to himself. Do you know? The first time I saw you, you had Victoria's shadow. I loved her very much. I can't forget her. As time went on, I realized that you are you, and Victoria is Victoria. I started to get confused, not knowing whether I liked you or her. When the truth was revealed, I realized how wrong I was. Victoria was an obsession, but you were my future. Eleanor, can you come back? I'm begging you. Julian spoke with tears streaming down his face. But my heart couldn't be stirred up anymore. That kind of thing of looking for the shadow of another person on someone else is disgusting in itself. If I had known from the beginning, I would have chosen to be alone for the rest of my life, rather than choose Julian. But God didn't even give me a chance to regret. In the end, I got up from the dining table. I didn't want to hear those so-called confessions anymore. And I didn't want to know Julian's real thoughts when he fell in love with me. I felt disgusted. Julian lived in a daze like this for 2 months. He began to run out frequently, and he always came home exhausted. My soul was getting weaker and weaker, unable to withstand the direct sunlight, so I didn't know what Julian was doing outside. Until one late night, Julian went out, and I followed him to a cemetery. On a tombstone with my photo on it, I saw the words, "Wife of Caleb, Tomb of Eleanor." Only then did I realize that Julian had been going out recently to find my tomb. But when I saw this tombstone, Julian and I were shocked at the same time. Julian was angry, but I only felt bitterness. Actually, there was nothing between me and Caleb. He and I both knew that there was no possibility between us, so we both buried this relationship deep in our hearts. It was also Julian's appearance that made me forget that moment of budding love. I felt sorry for Caleb. He was one of the few people in this world who was unconditionally good to me. This tombstone made me feel like I really had a place to belong. And Julian directly pushed down the tombstone and began to dig up my ashes. I was anxious inside. I hated Julian. I thought Julian could give me a home when I was alive, but he didn't. Now that I was dead, he wouldn't let me rest in peace. I angrily beat Julian on the back, but he couldn't feel it, and my hand passed through Julian's body. When I was alive, I was a coward. Facing life and death, I didn't even have the right to decide. Now that I was dead, I couldn't do anything. Julian, you bastard. Caleb didn't know where he rushed out from, and slapped Julian in the face. His eyeballs were bloodshot, and there was a patch of blue under his eyes. Presumably Caleb hadn't rested well recently. Let go of me. Why did you write that Eleanor is your wife? She's mine, even if she's dead, she's mine. Julian's mouth was bleeding, but his eyes were firm. Caleb sneered. Because you are not worthy. Watching the two of them fight, I only felt bored, so I sat on the fallen tombstone and swayed my legs. Actually, I thought this tombstone was good, and the location of the cemetery was also good. Sitting here, you could see the sea opposite. As expected, only Caleb knew my hobbies best. The two of them were tired from fighting and lay on the ground. The sky was filled with nebulae, which was very beautiful. Caleb weakly picked up a stone on the ground and threw it at Julian, panting. Why do you have to appear here? Can't you let Eleanor rest in peace? The person she hates the most now is you. How can you have the nerve to show up? Julian wasn't one to be taken advantage of either, and he threw a stone at Caleb as well, stubbornly replying, I said Eleanor is my wife, even if she's dead, she's still my person. Don't think I don't know about your dirty feelings for her. Caleb was so angry that he laughed. We're dirty? We have no blood relationship, and we're not as unclear as you and Victoria. We're very innocent. Don't insult Eleanor. I don't know why, but now when I hear Julian say this about me, I don't care anymore. Either I'm used to the fact that he always used to say harsh things to me, or I really don't care about him. Julian was silent. He looked up at the starry sky, and suddenly 2 lines of clear tears streaked across the corner of his eye. Why do I always do such bastard things? Why isn't the person who died me? Caleb suddenly sat up and sneered. Yes, why isn't the person who died you? When Caleb left, he warned Julian to repair my tomb. Otherwise he would use all his connections to bring down the Shen family. I don't know what Julian was thinking. He lay on the ground for a long time. The night wind lifted the broken hair in front of his forehead, reminding me of the time when the two of us had camped before. The stars that night were more beautiful than tonight. It was on that night that Julian suddenly said to me, Eleanor, do you want to be my wife? From liking to love, from love to hate, only 5 years too fast. Julian suddenly stood up, bit his finger, and wrote on the tombstone, Tomb of Julian and wife. Immediately afterwards, Julian lay down in the pit he dug, smiled in relief, and took out a dagger and cut his wrist. I frowned as I watched the blood flowing nonstop from Julian's wrist. I don't know if it was my illusion, but Julian's eyes suddenly lit up when he looked in the direction of my soul. Eleanor. I finally see you. I miss you so much. If I had known that I could see you when I was about to die, I wouldn't have delayed for so long. The sudden eye contact still made me a little uncomfortable. I don't know why, although I followed Julian for so long after I died, there was still a sense of strangeness when he called my name. You won't speak, are you still blaming me? I really know I was wrong. I shouldn't have trusted Victoria. She's already dead, and no one will disturb us anymore. Eleanor, I love you really. Julian wanted to get up, but he didn't have the strength, and the light in his pupils was fading away. Eleanor, if there is a next life, I will definitely meet you earlier, cherish you, and never lose you again. Eleanor, do you hate me? I subconsciously shook my head. I don't hate you anymore, but I don't love you either. Thinking carefully, Julian didn't seem to have done anything wrong except for not loving me. There was no reason for me to hate Julian. Julian smiled bitterly. But compared to your indifference now, I'd rather you hate me. Julian's voice became lower and lower, and he slowly closed his eyes. I looked at the already dead Julian and only said one sentence. If there is a next life, let's never meet again. My soul was completely transparent. It was obviously late at night, but suddenly a strong light appeared. I walked into the light, a long-lost warmth. There was a mirror in the light, and I saw the image reflected in the mirror. Caleb stood in front of the Buddha statue, constantly kowtowing. He twisted the prayer beads, closed his eyes and prayed sincerely. I hope Eleanor can get what she wants. Looking at the calendar on the wall, it was before I died. So the reason why my soul lingered for so long after my death was because all of this was what I wanted in my heart. I wanted to see Julian regret it. I wanted Julian to love me. My wish was obviously simple. I just wanted to live a peaceful and happy life, choose a city to grow old in, and choose a person to support each other with. But I still thank Caleb. I hope that in the days without me he can let go of the past, start over, and find someone who is a good match and loves him, and grow old together. It's still a regret. I didn't even get to say goodbye to Caleb properly. I should thank him for dazzling my entire youth during my younger years.